Sometimes you have to say no to a book for your own sake of sanity, among other things, and this is a video in which I'm saying no most definitively, and for good, at least for these particular books. So yeah, this is going to be a controversial video, I can already tell. Hi everyone, my name is Rose, also known as TA Summers. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be essentially on the topic of books that I will never read, never pick up, to 2025 edition. Some of these have been released this year in some capacity. Others, I guess, I think almost all of these have been released this year in terms of the books that I'm going to mention, and including one that's kind of a general topic in terms of things where I'm just like, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no and keep my peace. So we're just going to dive into it. There are a total of 5 that I've listed here. 3 of them are most definitive, and then 2 are on the fence in terms of things for my choices. And I'm going to try to streamline what my reasons are for choosing not to pick up these books as much as I can, as to not make this video too long. Some of these books, some of the books that I'm going to mention, like especially the one under the specific topic, are ones that I have either talked about or I'm going to talk about in a future video. So just know that in the conversations in which I'm putting a pin in, they'll be coming in a later video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. First book that I want to mention, which, oh boy, I know I'm gonna get some people looking at me like, Rose, like, really, you're gonna not pick this book up? Especially considering, like, some people know the fact that I really like the manga Dead Man Wonderland, as well as other dystopian type stories in terms of things. But this is a book that I am not touching with a 10-foot pole whatsoever because of multiple reasons, and I'll touch base on this. The first book that I chose in terms of I will never read this book, and it's a YA dystopia, is Last Chance Live by Helena Haywood Henry. And this book, oh my gosh, when I first saw the announcement for Last Chance Live in terms of what it was about, I said, I don't know if this is going to be a book that treats its subject matter with the sensitivity that it requires. This is a book by a Black woman, and she was invited to, I think, the Black book festival that, I think it was October. Yeah, I think it was October, so it was probably a month ago or so. And she held a panel there, talking about the book, and there were some comments that she made that rubbed me the absolute wrong way. But there's a lot of things that are going on with Last Chance Live that really just raised my red flags. And as a Black woman, I don't want to touch it. I don't want to touch this at all, because I feel like it is a narrative that is based on harmful stereotypes. I don't think it serves the community that it's meant to represent, which is Black girls. And I've talked extensively on this channel about how much I value respecting the agency of Black girls and women in terms of things, and I don't think this does it. I don't think this does it at all. And there's a number of different things that are in this book where I was just like, you know what, let me protect my peace. It has a very unlikable protagonist, very hard to like, and stream of consciousness protagonist is essentially about a dark-skinned fat Black girl who is competing to save her life in terms of trying to get out of death row. And she's basically on the world stage, in terms of things, trying to make herself the nominee that gets saved to get off of a throw and save her life, and because like she had committed a crime, and she's among people who've other kids who have done bad things in terms of earning their places on death row, and she's trying to compete on the world stage to try to get off of death row. Hey y'all, editing Rose here. So I wanted to have kind of a brief conversation at this point of the video about Last Chance Live that I think a lot of people might be missing in context. And I think if I explain it this way, it'll make a lot more sense in terms of why I made the decision to not pick up Last Chance Live in terms of things, despite the fact that this narrative has worked in so many other pieces of media. And I'm going to try to streamline it as much as I can in terms of things, because I could make a video on this topic by itself in terms of things, but since this is being tied into a larger video about books that I won't read, I kind of want to give context to that. So the first thing that I want to say is that with respect to Last Chance Live, there are going to probably be a lot of people who are like, Rose, this concept has worked before in a number of different pieces of media. And you can look to a lot of successful franchises that are made in Korea and Japan as kind of a reference and point to that. To give like some examples, Last Chance Live was comped to Squid Game, which is very, very popular on Netflix in terms of the series of um, people who were competing in that very deadly game and doing a number of terrible and cruel things. And the the interesting thing about that is the fact that you don't know in terms of what the protagonists are like starting Squid Game. Like you kind of get the cultural context of South Korea and some of the um, things about the characters, but you gradually learn about the characters in terms of what they have done and what they do to try to win the games in terms of things. And everybody is unlikable. Everybody is unlikable in some form or fashion in terms of things. And I'm not gonna go into the weeds for what Squid Game does, because I think it's not a narrative for everyone, but I think it does what it does very well in terms of a narrative piece. But there's a stark difference between that and what is done for Last Chance Live. There have been other pieces of media that have also been successful with respect to this kind of competition, where it's kind of like a death game or a game in terms of high stakes being involved. Some of the things that I can think of in terms of media that I've watched myself or played through in terms of games. Like some of the things, the properties that I thought of right off the bat, a lot of people will say Hunger Games in terms of that. But to talk about like Japanese media, especially in terms of what they choose to do, Dead Man Wonderland was one that I mentioned at the beginning, like to kind of give context to like the fact that it could appeal to me because I have watched the anime series and read the manga. It's about a boy who is accused of a crime he didn't commit, and essentially gets thrown in prison, and basically like has to fight to survive in this prison system in terms of things. And it highlights the people he meets along the way in terms of things, but it is a brutal series and it is not an easy watch and or read, depending on whether you pick up the short lived anime, which was only one season, or the manga itself. But it is a brilliant story. Another tale, like I've played many games with this kind of premise. Danganronpa is one that's a controversial pick because it has other aspects of it that make it kind of outside certain audiences in terms of appeal, but the same concept applies in terms of a group of students having to compete in a death game and very that they're skilled at something, but they have to complete Eden the death game in order to survive the circumstances in which they're entrapped. Another one is The World Ends with You. That is one of my favorite games in anime in terms of what they were able to do with the narrative there. I'm not gonna. The less you know about Tui going in, the better. And The World Ends with You is also known as Tui. But I usually encourage people to go in without knowing much about it and the impact that that has in terms of the big reveal for what the characters have to go through in terms of a time crunch thing. Otherwise, they'll be erased from existence if they don't. Uh, the less you know, the better, and I would think that that's a much better narrative in terms of and a better way of telling the story than what Last Chance Live would be. Another one in terms of some of the other things that have this death game type uh thing going on. Well, it's not so much like a death game type thing, but more the fact that the character starts off in a place where he is vilified for doing the right thing. And many people know this series. Persona 5 or Persona 5 Royale, depending on the version of the game that you pick up, has Joker, who is the main character in this respective story, vilified for something that he did to help another person. And he's essentially sent away from all that he knows to live with Sojiro, to kind of keep his head down and have a fresh start at another school because he was kicked out of the one that he was in. And it has a lot of commentary in terms of how Japanese, like a lot of the context of that operates in terms of how Japanese society views criminals and in terms of things. And it goes into a lot of nuances as the narrative goes on in terms of Joker's experience and what he has to do to um, basically keep his head down and try to live his normal life as he can past the vilification that he that is put against his character because of what he was what he tried to do, and essentially the situation that he finds himself in without going into too many spoilers or into the weeds and details of that narrative. But to talk about it, Last Chance Live doesn't do anything that these narratives do because it presumes to start with the vilification of the main character from the get before you even turn the first page because of misogynoir, because of operating under the assumption that this is a girl who is within the system, and there's this inherent vilification in terms of based on cultural context in terms of how black men, women, and children are vilified and are caught into the prison system in terms of things, and even the choice to make the main character of Last Chance Live um, as hard to like to start with. And this is not saying that the character has to be likable in order to have empathy for them in terms of the situation that they're in. But since it starts with so many vilifying stereotypes before the story even begins, and about this respective character and about her respective image, is completely different from all the narratives that I named aside from it in terms of where it chooses to start and what it chooses to have the reader who picks up this book assume before the story is even told. And that is a problem. And that is one of the reasons why I was like, okay, I don't really want to pick up this book in terms of things because I know about, because I know a lot of about the intricacies of these stereotypes because I am part of the community, because I am a black woman. it doesn't seem like it's respectful to the community that I am from, nor does it feel respectful for from a narrative standpoint, because it assumes it is it creates a construction of narrative that is based on stereotypes and vilification, and in terms of what it chooses to do, does not really have the same kind of appeal as some of these other stories in terms of things, in terms of where they start and being able to construct the narratives in the way that they do compared to it. And I think it serves other like it's a narrative that's intended to serve other communities, but it leaves out the community that it represents, which is fat, black, dark-skinned girls. And uh, for a YA, for its respective audience, I have a hard time thinking that there will be fat, dark-skinned black girls who will want to pick this up, because it's like, why would I pick up something that's going to inherently disrespect me or vilify me in a way in terms of things? I already get that in the regular. I don't already get that in some measure because of the culture that we live in. But like it is, like I don't understand how the author couldn't have thought some of these intricacies in terms of how that would come across, and how it harmful and steeped in misogynoir that would be. But that's my spiel, that's my rant, that's basically like everything that I had to say in terms of this addendum, so I'm going to get back to it. And the premise of that, oh boy, that does not feel like it treats the subject matter effectively at all. The other aspect, like, you can look at the cover here. I really don't even like the cover in terms of things. I'm kind of like happy about the fact that they didn't actually use a real black child on the cover of this, because otherwise I would be fuming. But I'm fuming about the fact of another thing that's kind of obvious about the imagery in this respective book. And I'm going to give a moment for y'all to think about what the image of that respective thing is. Because if you see the stereotype, you already know, what I'm going to say in terms of things. What does the silhouette on this cover make you think of? Give you a few moments. 3, 2, 1. Okay, this book and this movie. I cannot tell you how many times that the image of Precious and the book Push by Sapphire has been used as a weapon against the black community in terms of stereotypes, in terms of misogynoir, in terms of things. And I feel like this book plays right into that. Like, red flag. Like, when I saw, like I had read the premise of it first, and I was like, I don't think that's gonna treat the subject matter well. But when I saw the cover, I'm like, absolutely not. No. No, absolutely not. This is feeding into a harmful stereotype. You're not gonna treat this this young fat dark-skinned black girl with the agency that she deserves, and you're just basically like you vilify this black girl before even the first page is turned. And I hate that. I hate everything about that. I'm trying not to go too deep in the weeds in terms of this, because it could be a whole video in terms of unpacking all the stereotypes and stuff like that. Like, just not even like opening the book to start with, where like everything starts at on a bad note. And I want to have faith that I want to be wrong about it, but I think my gut pretty much says I don't want to pick this book up. But the other parts in terms of red flags that I saw of this, the author has no experience with incarcerated youth, so that was a big red flag for me in terms of things like. And to be fair, like, if I feel like if the author had experience or had done extensive research with incarcerated youth in terms of things, this book would not have been written. This book would not have been written, because it would have been like, okay, I'm playing into a very distinct stereotype. I want to actually talk to real incarcerated youth in terms of like, like the the harm of the prison system in terms of how black children are stigmatized, in terms of things like unpacking all of that stuff. It's clear that the sensitivity is not there. And there are other red flags that I've heard about this. I've heard of a black character that was referred to as a King Kong. That is very racist and anti-black. Very racist and anti-black. And the fact that a black author actually chose to do that, I'm like, no. The fact of, like, in terms of what Helena Haywood Henry said at the Black Book Fest, in terms of what inspired her to write this novel, also gave me a lot of red flags in terms of the portrayal not being sensitive in terms of things. The fact that she said she was inspired by a 4-year-old girl and made a crude judgment about her future before it even really began, and juxtapose that to the experiences of a white girl. Like, it's not even like a matter of just like class in terms of things, or like two different black girls' experiences, which probably would have been a better comparison in terms of things. She chose to stereotype this 4-year-old girl and determine her future before it even began in terms of, and I understand that there are children who don't have the opportunities or the privilege or the means to be able to grow up in environments where they are nurtured and cared for and things like that. But to just make a snap judgment like that just felt very irresponsible to me. And the fact that you are writing a book like this for teens, I don't think Henry is the person who should have wrote this book, if written it at all. The other part of this that also disturbed me was during that panel, she had mentioned that the reason, there was a question that was posed to her in terms of why she chose to make the main character a fat, dark-skinned black girl, and the response that really just was like, okay, no thank you, I'm not going to pick this up. She wanted to satisfy her curiosity. You can't tell me that this book isn't based off a number of harmful and anti-black stereotypes. You cannot tell me that based on all the collective information that, like, I literally just said in this. I don't think I want to pick this up at all in terms of things. And I've read some reviews, like, in terms of the book, just to satisfy my own willingness to kind of like see, okay, what are other people saying about this? They said the narrative was way too long, and there's an insinuation that the ending is heartbreaking, brutal, and I think this is probably a story of a dead black girl, and I don't want to read that. I don't want to read that. I wouldn't imagine a lot of black kids would want to read that, like, between the stereotyping and stuff like that. I don't think they would want to read it, because one thing that you're going to see, like, in terms of a common theme for all of the books that I'm listing on this list, is that they are by black authors. And if you take away something from this respective video in terms of a common theme between this, like, I think most of these, the vast majority of these are YA, and some of them are adult, but, you know, black folks in general in stories do not want to be used as an instrument end, and they don't want to read about that, number one. And also, when you're specifically talking about black children and teens in terms of the stories that they are looking for, they want stories that give them something to be, not tear down their humanity. So please remember that black children and teens are looking for stories that give them something to be, not tear down their humanity. And definitely writing a story based on crude stereotypes is not the way to do it. So I am giving a large breadth and pass to Last Chance Live by Helena Haywood Henry, and I'm going to leave it there. Next book on my list of books I will never read in, like, 2025 edition. I am putting myself on a moratorium on books that are comped in YA to Toni Morrison's The Bluest. I'm sorry, but so far my track record is 0 for 2 for any books that I have scene that don't dive into very disrespectful, very racist, very anti-black narratives in terms of things, which is not what Toni Morrison intended for the Bluest Eye. And I've talked about this several times on the channel before in terms of my reactions to the Bluest Eye, specifically when I read it. And I respect the work. I liked significant parts of it. I don't agree with certain things that were done in the book, but I very much respect it. But the two YA books that I'm going to talk about, which went into my decision to say, okay, I don't want to read any YA books comp to the Bluest Eye, because I fear that they're doing more harm to the community than they are being illuminating or valuing or respectful. The first one I've talked about on the channel before, and this is ironically one that was a National Book finalist, National Book Award finalist for this year, which I went off on social media in terms of like, how in the world did y'all nominate this horrible book in terms of things. There were some things about it, like, that I think had value, and I have a lengthy video review that I'm gonna put in the cards above and in the description down below if you're interested. But the first book that I want to talk about that was just like, this did not work for me, was Skin by Zoboi. And if you know how much I've talked about Skin by Zoboi, you know why I hate it. I'm gonna leave it there because I've talked enough about the book on my channel in terms of the issues that it has, both in my written review as well as in my video review, which I like I said, I'm gonna link in the cards above in the description down below if you're interested in seeing that. But the other book, which I have yet to upload a review for on the channel, that I think was like my worst read for this year, and it's probably not even going to be dethroned at this point. So sorry, Oakbound, you are no longer the worst book that I read this year. There's somebody that tops you by a long shot, and it was comped as a book that had had the mixing of narratives with Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye and Freaky Friday, which that has a red flag written all over it to begin with, because like those are not those one of these things is not like the other. These narratives are completely different. But this is a YA graphic novel. There are no trigger warnings in this respective graphic novel. I will and I'll get into a lengthy, I've already written a lengthy review on Goodreads, and on my blog for it. I will link in the description down below if you're interested in reading that before I post the video version of it. But Ngozi Ukazu, flip. Oh my gosh, the anti-blackness of this book, and reading this book put me in a depression for several days for the offensive things that are in it. And in my video, I'm going to unpack a lot of it. I don't, there is a very significant spoiler that I am tempted to say that will probably turn a lot of people off of this book, but I'd rather wait. In terms of talking about it at length. But there was so many problems with this respective book that I was just like, I think people are fundamentally misunderstanding what Toni Morrison's work, The Bluest Eye, has done in terms of showcasing the harms of racism, the desperately seeking love and acceptance in terms of Black people who are subjected to this kind of racism and bigotry in terms of things, and also the young girls at the center of that narrative, being able to unpack the direct harms that girl went through in terms of Piccola, and essentially being not taking into consideration the disassociation that happens when subjected to that trauma. And essentially both Skin and Flip don't tackle the dissociation that happens with respect to that, and they don't do it in a responsible way at all. And the fact that these narratives, both Skin and Flip, dropped the ball so heavily, I'm just like, I am not picking up another YA book that's come to the Bluest Eye, because I fear very greatly that it's just going to be very offensive, very anti-Black, and very playing into a lot of harms that don't benefit the Black community but serve as a means to an end for other audiences outside the Black community in terms of things. And this one was very easy to tell that this was not for Black people. This one was very easy to tell that this was not for Black people at all. And I said in my my written review, I'm like, I would not give this to a Black child. I would not give this to a Black child or teenager. I'm not saying that they can't read it, but there would be conversations. There would be conversations in terms of things where I'm like, I would not want that child or teenager to internalize some of the things that Chi does in this book or emulate them, very much so. And the fact that some of the heavier topics in this go not only unaddressed or unpacked, but are allowed to stand, I said no. And the fact that Ngozi Ukazu, I'm like, how in the world did you think this was a book that was okay to write for children? The Bluest Eye itself is not written for teenagers specifically. It's an adult novel that is used in terms of a lot of academic settings, in terms of being able to talk about these difficult topics and subjects. I know that it was offered on my when I was in high school as part of the AP exam, a novel that was presented as an option for my AP exam, and being able to unpack its themes and things academically. But and the other factor of it is that the Bluest Eye is readily unavailable because it is one of the most frequently banned books in terms of things. So there are a lot of teens who aren't able to read it and get the context of the original narrative, especially not through books like these. So basically, if the narratives themselves, they say that they're based on Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. A lot of teenagers cannot reference what Toni Morrison does in there to have the context in terms of what those themes are. Rather, I'll pick up one part of that and even pick up some of the harmful stereotypes in terms of what these books do. So I just said, you know what? No, I want to be able to read an author who tackles the interpretations of Toni Morrison's work in a responsible way, and Skin and Flip did not do that. Understatement of the century, essentially. And I'm going to leave it there. If you wish to see my review on Skin, cards above, description down below. My video review will be of Flip will be coming eventually in terms of things, but y'all are not ready. I was like that. This book put me in such a mental bad place after this, and I just don't want to. I want people to know what they're getting into before they pick this up. I did not find it valuable at all, and I think it did a lot of harm, and that's something that I'll probably that I'll definitely unpack when I have the opportunity to do so and post my review. So I'll leave it there. The next book that I'm probably going to say that this is just a personal choice. I know there are people in the community who have read this book, but I know right off the bat, in terms of this romantasy, is not for me. The Last One by Rachel Hall. I've heard too many horror stories of other people who just did not enjoy the experience of reading this romantasy, so I'm just it's just better for me to skip it, just not even go there specifically in terms of things. I'm just not interested in reading it, and I'll leave it at that. Another one that I'm going to say that I'm definitely not going to pick up, and this is a YA paranormal romance. I have read two of the author's other works before. I actually liked her debut. I did not like the follow-up, and I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to like this respective book, so I will never be reading Blood Moon by Brittany S. Lewis. I'm sorry. I don't want to read a knockoff of Twilight or Vampire Diaries. This is not in the cards for me. And basically, from what I've heard of that book, in terms of like the lore dumping and the fourth wall breaking and other stereotypes and things like commonalities in terms of things, I don't want to read it. It's not for me. I'm sorry. And like my other issue is the fact that I think Brittany S. Lewis is definitely an author that can be hard to get into in terms of things. Like I said, I liked her first book, The Undead Truth of Us, and I'll put a picture up here for your reference. And I talked about it on the channel before, and I've written a full review. But it did have some things that took away with it, and I talked about it in my review. But in general, I did like it. But literary horror is a hard genre to sell in any age group, including YA. And I think a lot of people were expecting of the first book here of The Undead Truth of Us for it to feature actual zombies and be like a traditional zombie horror, and that was not what it chose to do in terms of things. It is more of a story about grief in terms of things, and I understood where it was coming from. Where it was coming from, but like, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, it's this tough story to be able to sell, and it like for its audience it works. For the people who are outside of its audience, it doesn't work. And so I'll leave it at that. But the second book that she released, that Brittany S. Lewis released, that kind of made me say I probably need to take a step back from her work for a while in terms of things until I know things get better. The Dark Place, that was, I'm already going to say that like, and I'll put a picture up here for your reference. I'm going to say that's probably one of my most disappointing reads of 2025 in terms of what I was able to pick up, because I was not expecting it to be as I expected a lot more from it in terms of the creep factor, in terms of the horror factor, in terms of things, and the way that it made certain decisions and did things was not my cup of tea at all. And the writing didn't support it either in terms of things. And I think it was a step down from the author's debut novel in terms of things, even though it was in technically the same genre and age group. It was literary horror in YA, and it just did not stick the landing for me. But I'll have a reflection of The Dark Place later on my channel to be able to unpack that. But based on my experiences with those narratives, I just will not be reading Blood Moon, and also for the reasons that I stated. So I'll leave it there. So technically I have 6 books to talk about, not 5. So these are the last 2 that I'm going to mention, and I'm still on the fence about this. If I don't know if it's going to be never read, depending, like, in terms of things, but it's strongly leaning to the never read pile in terms of things, based on what I know about these books in terms of things and what they choose to do with their respective stories. And so I'll talk about the ones that I'm on the fence about. And if I make a decision later on these books where it's like absolutely not, I'm not picking these up, then we'll talk. I'll put a note on it. But first one I want to mention, I think, is understandable. If you saw one of my previous videos on the Agency of Black Girls and Women and talking about trauma, which I basically went off on this author in terms of the things that she did, promoting her spicy Greek myth retelling. And if you know, then you already know. The book that I'm mentioning is I, Medusa by Anna Gray. and this is a cover up for your reference. I'm not going to rehash everything that I said in the previous video. I can just link it up in the cards above in the description down below if you're interested in seeing me unpack what she did in the promotion of this book, specifically by using the image of the R&B singer Aaliyah depicted with her abuser R. Kelly in terms of things. Like, she used a picture of them in her promotion on Instagram to promote this spicy retelling of Medusa, and I just, like, that rubbed me the absolute wrong way. I was so upset, like, in terms of like filming the course of that video, and I had to take breaks because it was just like, what in the world were you thinking? What in the world were you thinking? Linking a very real underage girl who's pictured with her abuser to your respective promotional aspects of this book, which very much did not have anything to do with the content of this book, as far as I know. So that rubbed me the wrong way, and that's like I've been curious about whether or not, like, Ayana actually treats the subject matter with any kind of dignity, purpose, and maturity. That makes me be on the fence about it. I don't know if I'm going to pick this up or not, just to be able to see. There's some curiosity there, but more than likely, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to pick this up, and it's leaning more towards the never pile. It's probably better for me to skip it altogether. I'll just leave it there. I'll make a decision on it at some point, maybe make a note on it, like in this video, but at this point, I'm just like, I'm not convinced that this would be a good book for me to pick up at all. So I'm just gonna leave it there. Hey y'all, Editing Rose here. So I wanted to make a pretty major note of a mistake that I made during the recording of this video. I misspoke Tiffany D. Jackson's title of her YA novel, The Scammer. For whatever reason, I thought this book was called The Pledge. I don't know why I actually thought that, but I wanted to make the correction before that segment shows up. So I definitely misspoke the titles, but I meant to say for this respective title, it is The Scammer by Tiffany D. Jackson, not The Pledge. The Scammer by Tiffany D. Jackson. She's never written a book called The Pledge. I don't know where that came from, but just wanted to let y'all know. So going back to it. And the absolute last book that I think I'm on the fence about, and it's leaning towards a will never read, is a YA book. And a lot of people love this author. I actually do like some of her work, but some things about aspects of her work that I have read, I do want to reevaluate and possibly reread some of her books in terms of things, because I'm not okay with some of the choices that she makes to be able to promote these narratives. But this is the one where I was just like, I don't know if I want to read this, especially with the narrative choices that she chose to do with this respective story. So I'm gonna to my knowledge, I believe it is nominated for the Goodreads Choice Award for Best YA of this year. I'll get to the Goodreads Awards nominations in another video. I'm planning on doing a video where I vote in the final round and react to the choices there. But The Pledge by Tiffany D. Jackson is basically one where I'm like, I probably should not and do not want to read this book. And the very specific reason that I give in terms of stuff, a lot of people keep mentioning the fact that this is based on a true story in terms of things, but they leave out the context that this is based on a true story about white people at a college who were white students who were girls who were manipulated in a dormitory by a grown man. And that is not the story that Tiffany D. Jackson tells in The Pledge. Instead, instead of depicting the perpetrator, of this respective crime as a grown white man, she chose to change that character to a black boy student, which I'm going to tell y'all right now, like, we've been in terms of readers, in terms of authors, in terms of stuff, we have been fighting very long to stop the vilification of black boys in YA literature and in general. I'm like, why would you make that decision? Why would you make that decision in terms of things? Because it's such a deviation to what the original story was. And just to make that narrative choice, I'm like, I'm not comfortable with reading this. I am not comfortable with reading this at all, and I think it may dive into anti-blackness specifically. I just no. I'm on the fence about it in terms of things, because I don't know if for the Goodreads Choice Awards, I am going to try to intentionally read the narratives that are make the final round and are nominated, but I'm still on the fence about this one. If it makes the nomination list, I may or may not read it, but it makes me so uncomfortable. It makes me so uncomfortable in terms of things, and like I question in some ways in terms of wondering whether Tiffany D. Jackson thinks that black children and black teens want to read a story like that. Because as I mentioned earlier in the video, and there, again, common thread through almost all of the picks in this video in terms of things, black folks in general in stories do not want to be used as a means to an end. And they don't want to be used as a means to an end to appeal to other communities and other people and be used as a teaching thing. And also, again, as I mentioned, black children and teens are looking for stories that give them something to be, not tear down their humanity, especially in the image of other groups who are picking up these stories. And I think a lot of authors, and like I wish that this was a different thing entirely. It showcases the inherent biases of the publishing industry that's going on right now. I want people to understand that, we should do better by representing black girls and boys, black kids, black teens, in YA literature in terms of a way that does not disrespect their agency or their dignity. The more that I see this happening in terms of stuff, it makes me upset. It makes me upset because it's like I want better for the people that share my identity. I want better for the kids and teens who are picking up these narratives in terms of things and being able to see themselves in healthy ways and being able to take heart in the stories that they're picking up in terms of say, hey, that's me, that's my experience, and being able to relate to it, but also have educational experiences where it's led by empathy and the dignity and representation in terms of things that present them in a way that isn't based on stereotypes or assumptions or things like that. So, yeah. So, Tiffany D. Jackson's The Pledge, that's on the chopping block as well in terms of a never read. I'll try to see if I can make a decision about that, but at this point, it's kind of just like I'm on the fence about saying whether to say go with it or just say no, to preserve my own sanity and not be not have to contend with any of that. But that is my video on the books that I will never read or are leaning towards never reading in terms of things. So if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell to be informed when I post new videos. Thank you again so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next video. Bye.